Well, welcome to March, and as we're moving through this month, we're continuing in our rhythms to move through the fruit of the Spirit. And these things that God says, okay, this is the natural byproduct in your life of my Spirit. And as you draw close to my Spirit, as we surrender to His Spirit in our lives, these things, this is what's going to show up. This is the natural fruit. And this month, we come to goodness. Now, to walk us through that, I want to take you to a passage that's found in 2 Peter. And this is the passage that I want for us to sit with. It's interesting. It talks about God's goodness, and it talks about goodness in our life. And it presents us with this process. So let me walk you through it. It starts off in chapter 1, and it says this: His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of Him who called us by His own glory and goodness. And so it talks about God has called us, and in that He's displayed His goodness towards us, how good He is to us, the good that He's brought into our lives. And then it continues, it says, through these, He has given us very great and precious promises, in that through them you may participate in the divine nature. And so not only has He called us, but He's given us these things, these promises in our lives, so that we can actually be like Him, so that we can become more and more like Him, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires, leaving behind what we used to be enslaved by. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. And this is where we see this process. So he starts off and he talks about God's goodness and how He's called us, what He's given us, so that we might be able to become more like Him. And he says, in light of that, in light of what God's done in your life and the goodness that He's displayed, now I want for you to pursue a life that emulates His nature. And to do that, He calls us into this process. And the interesting thing, it starts with faith, which makes sense, because it starts with trusting God about what He said is true and what He's done. But then the first thing that He says that we add to faith is goodness. And He differentiates between goodness and self-control, and He differentiates between goodness and godliness. Those all come later in that process. He starts with goodness. Make every effort to add to your faith goodness. What is he talking about? What I think he's calling us to here is he's saying, on this journey of faith, here's where you start. Here's where you start. You trust God with what He's done. And then you just do what you know to do. Have you ever heard that phrase, do the next right thing? Just do the next right thing. Don't worry about what the end of the road looks like. Don't worry about how this is going to work out. No, just do the next. Goodness is, I'm just going to go into it and I'm going to do what I know God has asked me to do. I meet so many people who get caught up in, what is the grand scheme of things? And why hasn't God enlightened me on this over here? What He wants to do over here? What's happening over here? And they want God to answer these really big questions. But they're not faithful with what they know He's asked them to do. And so they're not serving inside of His body, and they're not inside a community. They're not spending time inside of His Word. And he in this passage, Peter, as he's writing to the church, he in this passage says, no, start here. Don't start way down the line. No, start here. Do what you know to do. Just be faithful with that. No, it doesn't stop there. You add knowledge. You're pursuing more of, okay, what does it look like to follow God? And more of, okay, what has God called me to? But it starts here. And so I just want to encourage you as you move through this month to ask, okay, am I just being faithful with what I know to do? I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I'm just be faithful with what I know to do. And as I move through the day, how can I bring goodness into the lives of those around me? because of what I know to do and what I know is good and right. And then also, how has God been good to me? And taking the time to reflect both on His goodness and then also how can I reflect that in the world around me? With what I know is the next right thing. I know is the good thing to do in this moment.